Hello and welcome to the Inventive Marketing Club number 14. This is all about how to make fab client testimonial videos. We're going to be looking at why that's important, and Claire and I are going to be giving you some tips on how to film, edit, and what software we use and how we do it. So for those who haven't met Claire, Claire works with me on video stuff. In fact, you do lots of things. We work together on lots of different things, but often what you're out doing for clients is going and doing video testimonials or helping them with their video work. So I'm going to be asking you a few questions, if you don't mind.
That's fine.
So just before we do that, can I just get a sound check? Make sure you can hear me. Just put a note in chat, say hello, wave, put a funny emoji, whatever you like, while I talk about the club, just for those who aren't initiated. So basically the idea is every single month we get together to talk about a different topic. This one's about video, but we've covered things like search optimization. I've walked through WordPress. We had a good one on understanding your clients better. And basically as we do those, they're all live every single month, but we record it. And if you're part of the club, then you get access to all of those videos. And we've done, well, this is the 14th one. I also hope to ask questions as we go along. So I'll try and answer those as I get opportunity to, or if we've got time at the end. It's always difficult to have a very rigid presentation for 60 minutes. And also what I'm trying to do is foster a bit of community as well. So within our clubhouse, which is on the next slide here, we've got a Basecamp project where everyone who's a member is part of that. So I know it's difficult at the moment, but feel free to ask questions of them or me, or get involved in other people's questions if you can help out, because I think the best way of sharing information and learning is just by putting our questions out there. So as I said, you've got in the Clubhouse access to every previous webinar, any tools, apps and resources that I find useful, I will post there. If you've got any apps that you find useful, then do let me know and I'll make sure I share them with people. Also, in fact, I was trialing it last month. We've got a podcast version of this webinar as well. So if you find it difficult to find time to be on the webinar every month, you can listen to the podcast in your car while you're gardening, walking the dog, or doing the dishes. So you can always catch up and keep up to date with everything. That should all be in messages in the Clubhouse. If you're unsure of anything, just ping me on Basecamp or send an email to hello@ratherinventive.com. Okay, hello, Claire and Nigel. Yes, nice to see you. Thank you for doing that. With questions, I will try and get to them as we go along. I really will. But depending on how we're going through the slides, I might have to rush through and answer them at the end, but I will do my best. Okay, so video testimonials. I love video, as you can probably tell. I think it's a really useful format. And I don't know why it took me 17 years to start doing a lot of it. It's such a freeing thing. Just give us a little bit of your background in video, Claire. What got you into video stuff and why do you like it?
Well, I studied video, so I kind of from there. Just to be honest, I've done all sorts. It was a way of sort of paying my bills, but a bit of bread and butter, and I'm passionate about it. I make my own shorts in my own time. Not that I have very much time these days, to be honest. But yeah, it's exciting, and I think you can do something quite creative and different with video than you can in other forms of marketing. So
yeah, that's right. I've seen some of your short videos. They're all mini horrors.
A bit weird.
Art noir, yeah, very interesting. But actually, they're a good way of perfecting your art, really, and getting better at it, because you can have these sort of mini experiments.
Yeah.
And I know what we're talking about here are client testimonials, but I don't see that client testimonials should be any worse than thinking about a good story. What is a client testimonial? A client testimonial is about your clients telling other people what their experience is like.
And it's an authentic story.
Exactly. And that's what's important. But that's what's so great about video, because you can have a nice little image of the person and a little short text testimonial, and that's great. But that's easy to make up. They are easier to collect now, although still I think a lot of people aren't so great at it. See, Say, Hola, or other service that you could use for that. But as Claire's right, it's difficult to get the real feeling that's when someone is talking to you, the camera, like that. You start to mirror their emotions and feel the same way they do. I'll talk about that in a minute. but yeah, it comes across as much more authentic. So
and it's amazing as well, because when you ask somebody to write something, they suddenly go very formal, very dry, and but when they say something on camera, they can say it really candidly, and actually they're uncut gems sometimes. Like, you can't pay for what somebody will just say off the cuff.
yes, yeah, exactly. And some people are very polished at it, but actually even people who aren't, if they can just tell you what their experiences are like, that is worth a lot to other people, particularly from a social proof point of view. Because that's one of the reasons testimonials are very useful, is that people can very quickly get an idea of whether they trust your service, whether they trust you, and that you have other people working with you. Yeah. So I also think that you can use it from educating potential customers. So you can actually use it as a way of sharing information that potential customers might find useful. So it's a way of them not just saying how great the service is, but actually maybe giving away some secrets or some tips. So just a few stats. I like doing stats at the beginning of things, just so we know where we stand. Now I've dug these up from sources which aren't listed on here, but I'll make sure they're all in the notes, so if you want to dig further. But about on the stat I read, 92% of customers read online reviews before buying. So these are just text reviews, the things you see on Amazon or Sehola. So that's a huge amount of people want to look at those. And like Lou, my wife, will often read the testimonials after she's bought something, and then sometimes go into a regret cycle. We all do that, I think, if you spend a lot of money on something. But certainly a lot of people read the reviews before they buy. And crucially, 70% of people trust reviews from strangers. They trust review from people they don't know. Now, you can get a bit of a problem online with review fraud, where people are paying other people to submit reviews. However, if you have enough reviews and you have a good mix of positive and a few negative, and they're balanced, they're a really good way to get an opinion and an idea of whether people are using it. Also, particularly whether you're getting regular reviews. You didn't just get a flurry of reviews at the beginning and then that's it. It's all about getting regular reviews so people can see that service is still working and people still like it. Also, this is quite interesting, that customer reviews can actually increase product conversion. Now, it depends on when they're used, but you can use it maybe as people are coming through the consideration decision stage of buying a product, and it can actually increase conversion. And this is where those product like tips or insights can be really useful, where you're sharing something about the software. I think it brings people a little bit closer. Something I've was certainly reading on these pages, but also I learned from a couple of podcasts, is that videos trigger emotions. I think Claire mentioned that earlier. But if we see someone smiling, and you've probably found this watching the TV or something like that, if you see someone smiling, you will find yourself smiling as well. It's the same with laughter. If you listen to someone laughing on a podcast, I start smiling, I start laughing with them. We mirror people. That's what we do. Most people do that. We do it to feel comfortable. We do it because that's the social situation. And often, as humans, as animals, we would do that when we're together and very close to each other. But video can give the impression of being close to someone. And also, something else I learned quite recently is actually, if you can get close to the camera and have a tightly cropped shot, that will actually give the impression that you're very close to that person and create a deeper bond. I mean, none of it is as real as being next to the person, but it does echo that or mirrors it. Video also has a higher retention rate compared to text. Now, that's retention of the information that's in the video itself. So this is useful for any video work, whether testimonial or otherwise. But people find it a lot easier to remember because we're very visual creatures. That's how we work. It's very quick for us to see something and interpret it, whereas reading is hard work. It actually takes a lot longer to go through our brain so that we understand what's going on, whereas something that's visual is a lot quicker, and so therefore it's easier to retain. And this is crucial for video testimonials, I think, they are easier to share. It's quite difficult sometimes to, you can share a blog, I guess, or you could take a little snippet from a testimonial that you've seen and share it, but it's a lot easier to see something on Twitter with a little embedded video and just share it with other people. Particularly if it's got you in it. So if I give a video testimonial to a product or service I've been using and they publish that on their website or all their social feeds, I'm going to want to share that because I am proud and pleased to give them that testimonial. So I'm going to want to share it with other people, and that can make it, that can sort of increase the reach. Anyway, let's move on to stats. So I'm just going to very briefly talk about how to ask for a video testimonial. I'm actually was just finishing off the email template because I've worked with a number of customers on different email templates for getting client testimonials, or for asking their clients about testimonials. So what I'm going to do is I've almost finished putting that chain together so you can see how to ask follow-ups, how to say thank you, what's next, and all those steps. I mean, obviously that you'll need to tailor them for the way that you're asking, but you can use them as a guide to start off with. I find that very helpful. I think it's quite difficult to ask for a testimonial. Certainly if you're not with your customer already. I think if you're in front of your customer and you've just delivered the service or the product, it might be easier at that time to get the testimonial. But sometimes it's quite difficult remotely. Maybe we've just finished a website for someone and we've then let the website bed in for 14 days or so. And so actually the project's been going on for quite some time, maybe a couple of months. And so at what point do you ask? So we tend to ask at the end of the process when we're wrapping up, making sure everything's okay. And what we tend to do first is we'll ask for just some feedback. So how did the project go? What are the benefits to them? That sort of thing. So just sort of general feedback, and that can be in text. If they're willing to give that feedback, then I would then go a little bit further and say, oh, that's really good. Do you mind doing that as a video testimonial? And so I'll then decide whether we can organize to go and visit them or we do something remotely. And we'll talk about the different ways we can do that filming later. But I wouldn't always just jump into doing a video testimonial. I think you might want to just find out who's interested first, who is keen, who's passionate, who's going to say really nice things about your company. And you can do that much easier with something like just a text testimonial. And that's actually, we'd use Say Hola for that. So we'd send out Say Hola after every successful project. And then the people who come back to that are the ones I will focus on to go and ask if they want a video testimonial. So know that if you do get a Say Hola review and you fill it out, I might well be in touch with you saying, that's really nice. Maybe we could have a video testimonial. The other thing I found quite useful is, and actually this can work for other emails as well, is to ask if people can do you a favor. I think we wrote a blog article on this. I will try and find it on our website. But if you ask someone to do you a favor, they feel a little bit more likely to do that, even if they don't like you. And I think the example that Louise wrote on the blog is, is it Benjamin Franklin? It might be, but he had someone who didn't like him, but he wanted his help on something, and so they wouldn't work together. But he said, look, can you do me a favor? So the other guy who was working with, I should get the story straight, I'll try and find it somewhere. The other guy he was working with felt obliged to do that because actually he wanted to help, and he felt like that asking for a favor was actually something that he could do. And all those barriers about him being his competitor just disappeared, and he wanted to help him. So actually it can be quite useful if you ask your customers if they can do you a favor, because a lot of those barriers go down and a lot of people are quite willing to help you if they can see that as an opportunity. I also think that some people just like getting involved. So people who are constantly giving you feedback, people who are constantly part of your community are the ones to ask. So anyway, I'm going to give you those email templates, and that can be your starting point. Okay, so this is where we get into the detail and the fun. We're going to go through interview formats, and Claire and I is going to talk about our experience and some tips and tricks that we found with that. Whether it's like a formal interview where you'll go and visit someone, or something quick at an event, or even remotely. Very similar to this almost. Okay, so we're going to start with formal interviews. I'll just give a rundown here then. Claire, maybe you can give me your feelings on it. So formal interviews are something you might see on the BBC. They're a very formal style. They're quite professional, definitely. Often you can have the interviewer behind the camera and the interviewee in front of the camera. I've got some visual examples coming up in a minute. Or maybe it's the camera is looking at both parties. So you've got the interviewer and interviewee almost facing each other, having a conversation. I think it's nice with formal interviews because you can send your questions in advance, so people have time to think about what they want to say. They can give a considered response. You can take your time with it. I do think they do take longer to organize than other methods we're going to talk about, because there's more involved. They've got to spend more time out of their day. They've got, you might take longer over the filming, but I think you can have a really good result. And for me, you can really dig into the company. I mean, when we've done testimonials, really most of the video that we film is focused on what the company does, how they help people, a little bit on how they work with us, and then moving on to the actual testimonial. What are your thoughts on them, Claire?
Exactly. Along that sort of line, it's a great way for the customer to showcase their services, and it's a selling point when you're trying to lure them onto the camera. So that's an incentive for them. They're great. They're traditional. It's good to be able to sort of pre-warn people what the questions are. However, there is that sort of balancing act of them not overthinking it and writing a script and trying to memorize it. So that, there's a balance of how you manage it. But yeah, like you say, you can get a really sort of full sort of flavored response, and it's generally you can make people quite comfortable because you can kind of set them up and it's slightly more staged and you can take your time with it.
Yeah, I'll just, here's some examples of different interviews. They're not all customer interviews. We've got one there with Matt Jones from Whitley Jones. He's in the bottom right here. And that's actually what I would call quite a formal customer interview. The camera is, Matt's just slightly off to one side in the shot. We don't want people dead center. Am I right, Claire? It just looks a bit strange when people are dead center in the shot, particularly their head. So if my head is in the middle of the shot like this, it looks a bit weird.
I
want to be one to one side or the other. I want my head to be about a third of the way down in the frame.
Yeah.
I don't know where this comes from. Do you know the background to that? The placement of
I think
people in the frame?
Part of the golden meme and sort of how you frame a photo. So it's just there's certain lines that work better and draw people in. You can be dead center, but it evokes a different feeling. So it's quite intense. But if I'm sort of back to the side, or there's lots of different, each sort of position means different things and gives a different feeling to the person viewing it. So there's just different techniques. So for interviews, it's more comfortable, I think, if somebody's off to one side. Plus it allows you to have the company logo up in the top corner. You can have their name down the bottom and where they're from. So you're creating space, because the worst thing you want is to have like a logo slap bang over someone's forehead.
Yeah, exactly. I remember for my university days when I studied broadcast engineering, there were different techniques for that. And often you want people to, let me get into the right side here, you want them to look into the frame. So like Matt there, he's slightly turned into the frame, so he's coming towards it. If people are turned away, it looks a bit strange again, because what you see then, I don't know if people are watching live or the video, then what you'll see is there's a lot of space to my back, and that creates drama. It creates suspense because you think something is going to come into that space behind, and that's really useful if you've got horror film or something like that. And I often see that now when I'm watching films, and there's this space behind the character. I think something's going to happen in that space. So you don't want that. When you want a nice, comfortable video testimony, you don't want to create drama like that, because it's odd. So I often work to the thirds. So if you can imagine splitting the video up into a grid of 9 blocks, then you want the eyes to be on the top or the bottom, or the landscape to be on the top or the bottom. We could probably do another webinar on that sort of stuff and setting things out. But essentially putting the subject to one side or the other, if you can do that. So there's an example with Matt where he's looking towards the camera and I was interviewing him just slightly off to the side. So Claire's doing the video work on this one. So she was behind the camera and I was just slightly to the side of the camera, and Matt's just talking to me. I think this is quite a nice style. It's easy to do. I'm not in the frame. It's all about the customer. And that's not his bedroom, by the way. That is, they do bed sets for schools. So that's an example of what they're selling. So where possible, I'll try and get an example of what their product is in there, or get them to hold their product so we can it's a lot easier and everything's in there. Another couple of examples, and these are from the podcast interviews I do, which aren't with customers, although actually Nick is a customer, but we weren't talking about his company specifically at the time, is to do these side-by-side interviews. So I am sat on one side, Nick is on the other. Sarah in the top left one, Sarah's on one side, I'm on the other. And I find those quite comfortable ways of interviewing with people, although it's took me a little while to get into it because there's a lot to set up. I've got to get all the camera work set up and then have all my questions, make sure I'm briefing the person there, and then keep the conversation flowing.
Well,
but it's quite nice.
Conversation, that sort of interview. So it's you see who the interviewer is. Whereas with Matt, where it's just him, you have to, unless you have somebody sort of saying the questions and you're happy for the voice to be off camera, you need to coax the customer to say the answer, ask the question in the answer. So you don't need to have a cutaway. So.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas here you can see me asking the question and then Nick would respond. But yes, you're right. If you're working with Matt there, then I would say, so Matt, tell me a little bit about your company. But I've briefed him to say, when I ask you a question, just bring some of that question back into your answer. And it can make a big difference. So that's one way of doing it. I think quite a formal way, but I quite like those. And I actually think the interview style with a customer, even though you might be getting a testimonial out of it, actually having an interview is quite nice. You're providing value. You know, certainly if the customer's talking about the product and how they use it, as well as hopefully saying how great it is, I think it gives it some legitimacy.
Yeah, and it's something that we're all very familiar in seeing. So we the side by side, you have that on like the morning news, that type of side-by-side interview. So we're very used to seeing that. So it's very professional and traditional in approach.
Yes, absolutely. I'm the image on the bottom left is just stock photography, just for anyone wondering. That wasn't a shoot we did. But what I thought it showed is a good example of a sit-down interview where you've got the interviewer and interviewee on one side of the camera and then the camera operator quite close in actually on that. Okay, so next one is it's like a quick video style. I call it Vox Pop, and a Vox Pop is something I learned about again when I was at university. But it's basically like the voice of the people. It's like going out there and getting a flavour of opinion and emotion about from people. Often used on the news, actually, isn't it? If they've got a news article and they just want to go out and see what other people think, whether it's relevant or not, they often do this. It can be quite a useful way of gauging opinion. But you could also do the same thing about customers, for customers. So if you've got an event and you've had a really successful event, as people are coming away or milling around getting some coffee, you could see if they want to just say a few words about how they felt the speaker workshop went, or what they think about the product test drive or whatever it is. And I think the nice thing about these is they are more casual. People haven't had an opportunity to get nervous or worry about what they're going to say. You just literally ask them. And as you're asking them, you're filming. And obviously, if they don't want to do it, you can cancel that. But you often get a more authentic answer because you're going to get that emotional initial response. Now, whether that's what you want, I don't know. But if you collect enough of them, then you're going to get real enthusiasm from people that I found. They're quick to film and request. You don't need to have a long email chain or schedule anything. You're there at the event, or I've often used it if we've done workshops, then we'll get some of these Vox Pop style afterwards. It can be quite risky for live broadcasts though. If you don't know who you're interviewing and you don't know whether they're good on camera, what they're going to say, whether they liked your event or not, then you might want someone to prime them in advance and know who you're going to interview. I certainly know for radio interviews, they don't just let anyone come on the line. They'll have a researcher speaking to them in advance, making sure they're not going to be too weird. What are your thoughts on these, Claire?
They're great for capturing the energy in the moment. So, for example, capturing it at an event, you want to catch that excitement, that energy. But yes, there is a risk to it going live. I think anything live is a bit risky. But it's also, it's not formal. They're not over considering their responses. You are just purely capturing them in the moment. So it is authentic, and it's a great way of quickly getting feedback. Because if you get a montage of different people talking about your product, capturing different sort of key selling points within those Vox Pops, that's a montage. That's a video testimonial in itself.
Yeah, exactly. So I've got a few examples on the screen here. There's one from a few years back where we were doing some marketing workshops. And at the end of those workshops, I just asked a few people who were quite active in the session if they wanted to just do a few Vox Pops for us. So we stood them in front of the banner and just asked them a few questions. What did they feel? How do they feel the name, who they were, a little bit about the event. What do they get out of the event? What are they hoping to take forward? That sort of thing. Just a few questions. And it may be that you can't use all of that interview. In fact, it's probably a bit boring if you were to use all of that and you were to string 5 of those together. What I would tend to do when we come into editing is take the loose thread of what people are talking about, like getting a feel for the excitement, how they felt before they came, what they've learned during, and how they feel after. And you can actually get that story by several people telling that story over a period of time. So that's what we did with that one. There's another example here from Tourism Forum. Again, this was for our podcast, but these were almost customer interviews for the forum within the podcast. And these were just done with me in the frame. So actually as a selfie style. So I'm holding out the camera, there we go, in front of me like that. And I've got the mic. And I'm like a roaming reporter, really. And I'm just getting feedback. Crucially with these, one of the things that's helped me when I'm getting Vox Pops quite quickly is to get people to say their name, because you will forget who they are and you don't have time to write it down unless you've got someone with you. So get them to say their name and their company on video while you're recording. It makes it so much easier to find them later. And then have one good question to ask them. Even if it's the same question you ask everyone, have one good question. And it may be that turns into a short conversation, which is fine. But I found that when I just sort of go and ask someone a question and I don't have a good question that's specific to them, then I'll bumble that and fumble that start. And it's not professional. And so the best way I found of doing that is I listen to something, I find out a little bit about them or listen to something that they say or something that resounds with them, and then ask them a question specific to that. It's quite helpful. Okay, so next, the video conference style. So this is where you might want to do it remotely, for example, because you can't meet with them. Maybe they're in a different country. It's not going to be viable to do the travel. It's also just easier to schedule sometimes. I think if you just want a quick opportunity to speak to someone and you've got people who are geographically diverse, you could either invite them all into one place, which is going to be hard, or you can do something remotely. So they're definitely easier to schedule, I think, less travel involved for people. Claire made a good comment when we were talking, when we were going through the notes for this, about people feeling more comfortable in their own environment. If you're sat at home or I'm in my office, I'm comfortable here. We're not going out to a central location or somewhere, or a studio or somewhere I don't know, where it's a little bit nerve-wracking. So actually that can be good because people can be at ease with their stuff around them.
Definitely. And you don't have a whole pile of equipment pointing at you and people standing around staring. So it's just you and your laptop.
Yeah, exactly. And actually cameras on most computers now are built in, so they're very small. So the little camera that's up on the screen here, I know it's there and there's a little green light to show it's on, but apart from that, you don't have a big camera in your face. It's not so obvious. There's no mic shoved there. So you're not so conscious about it. And actually, after a few minutes or so, you can relax. And actually, that's something that you were speaking about, again, while we're looking at this, Claire, is that getting people relaxed.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's really important. I'm not comfortable in front of the camera. I'm much happier behind it, but there's lots of techniques that you can do subtly as well. So don't let people know that you're trying to help them, but by allowing them to sit, they've got the security of a chair, by sort of mirroring them. So if they're all sort of tense and serious, you don't want them looking like that through your video. So it's kind of like, right, okay, we need to relax the shoulders, and you do it with them, and you're like, come on, we need a big breath, and you kind of play with them and make them feel comfortable, and kind of start filming without them knowing, do a fake dummy run. But sometimes when people just feel like there's no pressure, they just go for it. So there's so many different little things that you can do, and each person's completely different.
Yeah.
So it's about tailoring it and being being able to adapt your plan, because not everybody's just going to be able to sit there and spiel out what you want them to do in one go. So it's making sure you've got the time, and don't put any pressure on yourself or them, particularly them.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, in the early days of doing the podcast interviews, I found it quite stressful myself. And I think that puts a little bit of stress on the person you're interviewing. I'd always mess up the beginnings and starts and stuff like that. And so what I found is, if I can start well, and actually this works for any presentation, but if you can start well and almost script out that first question, make sure you know their name, you've got to script out the first question. For me anyway, it puts me on rails.
Yeah.
Because I've succeeded in that first bit, they've responded, and now we can have a conversation and everything's fine. But actually in the early days when I would mess that up, that would just make a very stunted start to the interview. And that works for any interview at all. Some of the issues you can get, and I've definitely had these doing a lot of the podcasts and some of the remote interviews I've done recently, are about, it's difficult to control audio quality and visual quality, and maybe even disparity between the two screens. You can see even the difference between my office and Claire's office. There's different lighting. I mean, Claire doesn't do a lot of in front of the camera, so thank you very much for doing this one. Whereas I do, so I've got more lighting, and I set up for that. I've got a special mic that I use for that, where some people are using just a headset one. Internet speed, if that's the biggest issue for me, just getting people having awful internet speed. I know we've done a few, and if you get a few glitches on there, especially audio glitches, it's just unwatchable and it's not fun for people. So making sure that you do everything you possibly can to help them have a great internet speed, like closing all programs, closing any downloaders such as Dropbox or Google Drive, just shutting everything down and just focusing on that one interview. You've also got limited camera angles, and we'll come back to that later. But if you have more camera angles, you actually have more opportunity to make the edit more seamless, if that's what you wanted to do. Here are a few examples of that. So we've got a rather inventive, something inventive interview with Ronald in the middle there. We've got an actual client interview with for TikTok. An example of a bald bloke with a beard. I don't know, I'll put that in there. I think that's just filling the space, but it's just an example of how people might sit while they're doing an interview. But for me, with interviews, it's all about lighting. So trying to get people to, like that's I've got a light just over the top of the Mac, and it makes a huge difference in terms of lighting up my face. And it's not just so I look more better. It's easier to see me. It's easier to see my features. And so that's what you want to do, is get people to turn on all their lights, make sure everything's as bright as possible. Yeah. And we'll go through a few ideas on that in a minute.
And that's why I'm sat next to the window.
Although you could turn that light off above you there. It's actually
I do.
Looks like a halo. So next is the selfie. And actually, this is not something I've requested of any clients, but actually a lot of people, I've seen it with some of the people I've spoken to, that they get people to send in like selfie videos, whether it's done on a webcam like this, but it's just a video of them, or they're actually just taking a selfie video and sending in. The whole point of this is that you're able to get that authenticity and in fact, intimacy from that video, but you don't have to be involved in the filming of it. So you can, if people are interested, you can say, oh, maybe you can just record something to camera and send me the video file. It's easier to schedule because it's asynchronous. You don't have to be online at the same time as them. You don't have to be present. No one has to travel anywhere. And in fact, they can do that testimonial wherever they are. And then sometimes the difference between the audio quality and the video quality, that can add authenticity, if they're just, if it's not too polished.
Yeah, the challenge with it is getting people to kind of do that of their own steam, because it's quite easy for them not to.
Yeah, it's much easier for them to say no because there's no pressure to do it, there's no commitment. So I put a question mark here, incentivize. Is that something that could work? Maybe that you can give them a discount to your product or service, or maybe you could offer them some food, which is that always incentivizes me. There's different ways of thinking about it. If you need to sort of push people over that barrier, what are they going to get out of it? I know I interviewed a guy, you might remember his name, Claire, from SEO Domination. He was all about affiliate marketing. And one of the things he did at the end of his webinar course was that he would say to everyone, if you give me a testimonial, If you achieve your goals, which were to get the price of the webinar back in affiliate sales, then he would give you the price of the webinar back as well. So you double your money. So basically, you would end up not paying for the webinar and getting the same price of the webinar back if you give him a video testimonial.
Yeah.
And he said that the reason he wasn't losing money is that most people didn't do that. Whereas a lot of people were incentivized to do it. And the ones who did it, they actually got probably a couple of $100 out of it or back. So they were highly incentivized to do it. And because he had enough people coming through, that obviously some people didn't want that. So he was still getting paid for it. I thought that was quite an interesting way of doing it. And he if you go back and find that podcast episode, so Greg, I think it was.
Yeah.
Jeff?
Yeah. I don't know.
I'll see if I can... I'll find it, but it's SEO domination, and he actually talks about how he does those video testimonials. But they are basically where people are sending in their own videos.
Yeah, well, if you can work out your ROI on a lead, then that's what you have to play with. So if you can work out what that margin is, then you can get quite creative in what, whether you give them money back or send them a gift, do something slightly different, be memorable.
Yes, be memorable, remarkable, and we talked about that in the customer, going through, analyzing your customer and saying thank you. Actually, if you can get that testimonial and then you say thank you, that becomes a remarkable thing in and of itself. So therefore, not only they might share that testimonial or share your service, but they're more likely to do so after you said thank you as well. I don't have any examples of those, but selfies are something that are... you just got to be wary that it's quite, unless you are doing it all the time, maybe you're younger and more used to doing that. But for me, I'm very self-conscious of it. I don't mind interviewing people in public because I feel like I've got a job to do. I'm interviewing them. It's obvious what's going on. If I'm talking to the camera with my mic just underneath and I'm in the middle of public, and actually the image there is from when I was doing the Bath Digital Festival, I'm incredibly self-conscious. So you've got to put yourself in the position of your customers, that they're going to be self-conscious too. So maybe if you can give them some tips to get over that, like do it in their house or do it where they're comfortable, then that's going to help.
Definitely.
Okay, so questions to ask. So we've got to understand different formats and different ways you can approach customers to get a testimonial, and there's lots of different ways you can do that. But asking questions and knowing what to say can be difficult, or they can just be boring questions that don't really help your customer. I think at the very least, you want to be asking questions that are of interest for your customer to answer, because people like talking about themselves. So the more you can ask in-depth questions about your customer, the better. If you can use this as an opportunity to get some actual feedback on your product, then even better. Really asking them in-depth questions about what they like, what they don't like, what they use. If you've got a few minutes, why not spare that time on that and use it as some market research at the same time? You don't need to share this in your testimonial. And obviously, often we will ask a question like that at the end of an interview to find out what they'd like us to improve. We don't include that bit in the testimonial, but it's useful to us to find out from the customer at that time what they find, what we could do to improve generally.
Definitely. And I think it's important because sometimes customers can feel that they're under pressure to just say nice things. So you've got to give them the opportunity to give constructive feedback. And I think, even if it's a small thing that, irritated the process and they have that space to be able to say it, they will respect the process a lot more and probably say much nicer things if you give them that window to be truly honest with you.
Yeah, and actually, if it's a small gripe, actually getting that out can be useful, because you may or may not be able to address it, but if at least people feel they've been heard.
Yeah.
And if you can address it, even better, because they feel like you have listened to them.
Yeah.
But it's definitely worth asking. So often you can use client testimonials as a way of digging deeper, and that's definitely how I would advocate using them if you can. And often people like that. I mean, I've done some recently for clients, and their customer was very keen to share their screen with me so they could show me how they use their product. I was like, this is fab. And we went out for an hour. It was over 3 times as long as it was meant to be. But they were so keen to show me all the different ways that their client's product worked. It was brilliant. So I didn't want to stop them, because this is actually gold when I can share that with the customer and say, hey, look, these are all exactly how they use it. And as they're talking about things that they would like the product to do more of. So it's brilliant. So definitely, if you've got time to do that, it's worth doing. But anyway, so you want to ask questions that can sort of demonstrate trust and proof of your service to the people watching them. You want to get a testimonial, definitely. And the testimonial is where they're saying something nice about you and why they'd refer you to others. And I think ideally, this is something new I'm trying to do, is get them to share some inside information or a tip, something that they find useful at working with you or what you provide. And that's educating your customer, really. So that's going to be quite useful. Mm-hmm. So here are a few examples. And again, I'm going to share these in the Clubhouse. So I've got a full list, really, that I'm going to share with you of like how you might structure a 20-minute customer interview. This is for a remote interview, but you could use that for any sort of interview. So first thing to do, what's your name and who do you work for? Just whether you include that or not, good to have that in there again, so you remember. And then how do you or your company help people? I think you could ask, what do you do? But people are going to be very formulaic and just say, well, I am the production manager for such and such a company. Well, okay, that's functionally useful, but that's not exciting. What I want you to do is, how do you help people? Whether it's internally or externally, your customers, how is it that you help people? Because I think that's just more interesting. It's more human. What's the one thing that you do that people remark on or enjoy? Again, that's talking about themselves or their product or service. Maybe it's giving them an opportunity to promote themselves as well. Something that Claire, I don't know if we mentioned, but if you can give people, and this may be the reason that they want a customer testimonial, but if you can give people a reason, an opportunity to promote their product or service on your channel and to your audience, then that might swing it for you.
And they'll share it for you.
Yeah, exactly. And they're going to want to share it. So what's one thing that you do that people remark on or enjoy? The other is, what one area have, rather Inventive, helped you with in your business? So that's getting them to dig deep on a particular item. You might want to say, how have we helped you with analyzing your statistics? You might be able to use that question in a few different ways. But essentially, you want to get them to narrow down on something rather than just saying, rather Inventive, great. Get them to say what they're great at, why we love working with them, that sort of thing. And then this is the testimonial. You ask the question, if you were to recommend Rather Inventive to a friend or colleague, what would you say? What they're going to give you back is something you could just, if you're just looking for a testimonial, you could just clip together testimonials from people which are just the answers to that question. And that could work quite well. And I think you can do this in text. I've got an example where you can just ask that question in text and you're going to get a good testimonial out of it. It works equally well in video. So I definitely ask that question. It just seems to elicit the right response to be something that is genuinely, oh, we like working with Rather Inventive because they do X, Y, and Z. Well, brilliant. Now you've told people that you like working with us and for these reasons. And then what Claire would do is magically edit all that together. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second. You could also ask that, and I haven't got it in here, but you could also ask, what makes their day, what successes they've had over the past year. You could ask about what one thing could we do better, all that sort of stuff. But, I'm just keeping it small for the screen here. So this is what I'm going to give you, common interview questions, along with some links to other things that would help. The one thing I would say is that if you've got time to do this and you're not restricted, do ask why. So when people say, "Oh, I like this," say, "Oh, that's interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?" Or ask for examples, because the more you can do that, this is your customer research. Then your market research, and you're finding more out about your customer, why they buy your service, why they might recommend you, and why they continue to use you, because that is a gold mine that you can use to either refine your product or service or help find more people like them. Okay, so I'm going to make sure you've got links to those on the replay in Basecamp. Okay, so some tips, and we're going to go through these. So just looking at how you film, edit and publish and hopefully come up with a great testimonial video. So we're going to start with filming. My first bit of advice here is just think about obviously the story you want to come across, but after that, audio. Get good quality audio. Make sure you're using a mic if you can, like an external microphone like this. Sure, this is a USB microphone, but I can also plug it straight into the iPhone. So it's particularly useful for me because I can use it in 2 different contexts. And then lighting. I think if your audio is bad, but everything else is great, it's going to be really difficult to watch. But actually, if you're conveying some useful information and maybe it's a little bit dark or the frame is slightly cropped off to one side so you can't really see the person very well, it's going to work better. So use an external mic, try and get it close to their mouth as possible. I'm guilty of this if I'm interviewing someone about holding the mic over to the wrong way and it's a little bit quieter. Getting rid of external noises, and they're quite hard, aren't they, Claire, to get rid of that?
Yeah. So what you have to remember is if you can hear it while you're filming, it will be magnified on the edit. It's definitely there. If you hear a bus going past, you're going to hear it. So just be aware. I know there's a million things to think about, but just keep your ears peeled. If someone's slamming a door in the distance or giggling in the next room, you're going to hear it. So the amount of times I've, struggled with that, you can't erase that. So definitely.
Yeah. I've had other things where people are tapping the table, and so it goes through the mic's on the table and they can hear it, or maybe they've got a tie clip and they might brush it. I'm just brushing the mic here for people to hear, but that picks up so clearly, and it's awful, and you just have to cut that section out. There's no way of getting rid of it. Echoes are terrible. You can get rid of them a little bit if you know what you're doing, and it is hard. The best bet is not to go in a very hard room. If you're in a room with no furniture in at all, it's going to echo like crazy. So you really need to go in somewhere with soft furnishings, and notice the echo. If you can hear the echo, it's going to be worse on the recording, definitely. So try and avoid that. And
I would definitely, as long as it's not live, I would definitely. If you ask them a question, just take a couple of takes, because their answer will change slightly. But if there's something that's not quite right in one, maybe they're squawking or
squawking. What's that?
When people you can hear all the sort of mouth juices, or they as before they start, because they're sort of jumping onto the question in sort of eagerness. You can trim out bits of that, but if you have a couple of options, you're safeguarding yourself, and it helps them to relax a little bit as well.
Yeah, another thing to do when you're filming is definitely tell them not to worry about making mistakes. If they make a mistake, don't try and correct themselves too quickly. Just stop, wait, rephrase, and start again. Because otherwise, if you need to edit something out, and I'm terrible for this, as Claire probably knows, I'll be correcting myself halfway through a sentence. It's just the worst. I mean, Claire's not going to be able to edit that. So I really need to stop and start again. What
I tend to do with some people is let them get to the end and go, that was great, but let's just do one more take. Because sometimes there's like a point in the question where they're just going to keep stumbling, and they're going to get frustrated with themselves. They're going to start getting tongue-tied because they're really concentrating and trying to get out a word that they're struggling to get over. And if that doesn't work, then maybe leave that question, come back to it, let their brain think about something else, and just keep the pressure down. Just it's an art to do it, but I think if you can kind of make them sort of feel comfortable, and just you're not judging them, you're not rushing them, it just allows them to sort of have a breath, or offer them a glass of water, just give them a few minutes just to take a bit of a time out. And we'll start again. So as you sort of work with someone, you kind of know what works for them. So there's lots of different things that you can do to make someone comfortable. But
keeping them. I like the idea of turning the camera on early as well. So get everything set up, press record, and then maybe chat to them, pretending you're setting up or twiddling some knobs, getting stuff done. Then they're not worried about the actual switch on, because that gets me as well. It's like, I've got to start, right? I've got to start. And I keep going, I've got to start, and I don't start. And actually, the best thing to do is just start recording, and then just continue chatting them and say, that was good, wasn't it? And then get into what you're doing. And I think you're good at doing that. So yeah, avoiding starting, because that puts pressure both on the interviewer and the interviewee.
Yeah. Oh,
I also like.
Sorry, just one thing. This is quite difficult for people when they first learn to do it, is just remember to nod and smile. Don't go in the background, or like chuckle at what they say, because you will hear that and it's impossible to like edit it out. So you suddenly have to turn into a nodding, smiling person when you're filming and interviewing someone.
Yeah, you're encouraging them to talk on. Again, it depends on the type of interview. If you're in it, then obviously you want to do that. Actually, your nodding and noises could be useful. But if you're out of shot and you're not going to be in the interview, yes, you don't want any noise to be there.
Yeah.
So just in terms of lighting, I think that's really important as well. Getting people to turn all the lights on in the room if they can. Not to face. Oh, is it? You don't want the camera. You don't want them in front of a window.
No.
Because if they're in front of a window, the light is going to be so bright, it's going to overexpose the video, or the camera's going to try and expose correctly to see outside, and you're going to get a silhouette. So you don't do that. However, use it the other way around. So get the camera by the window facing in, and have the people stood looking out. That way you're going to get all that lovely sunlight falling on their face. There's going to be no shadows. It's going to make them look great. Because the problem with lighting and separate lights like the one I've got here is that if it's close, you can get a lot of shadow, and
it's quite harsh. It's quite orange as well. So one of the things, if you are using a camera, is to try and set the white balance as well, because you don't want to be orange or sort of over extreme.
Yes, and you can. It's difficult with maybe an iPhone or something like that, where they're automatically adjusting. But if you have a regular camera, you can just hold up a bit of white card to the camera, and it sets the color according to that. And you can see my webcam's just automatically adjusting, which isn't ideal for this situation. I think people who've watched the podcast in the past have noticed I used to have an orange banner in the background, and that was awful because it would constantly change everything to look blue to try and make that look as white as possible. So we talked about relaxing, being positive. People echo this. We've already talked about mirroring and how that works. You can use that to great effect in video in your customer testimonial videos. You can use that in person as well. If you're relaxed and you're happy and you're chatting, why should they worry? It's like going on a plane and having your pilot just going, worried about their problems. They're not, they're calm. They do this all the time.
And making sure that only the people that need to be there are there, because if they're not used to being in front of the camera, if they've got their work colleagues smirking in the background, it's just going to put them off. So I prefer generally just being one-on-one with somebody, because it just helps them focus and relax a lot more.
Yeah, definitely. Just quickly on live or recorded, I would generally go for recording something rather than broadcasting it live. Only because it allows me to correct any mistakes. However, I would advocate recording as live. So pretend it's going out live and you've only got one take. Certainly if you're, maybe not with customer testimonials, but if you're doing any sort of recording where you want to do something, if you know you've got an opportunity to redo it, then you will, and you'll take longer to do it. Whereas if you record it in one take, and don't worry about the small imperfections, that's natural, that's human, then actually, if you'll get better at doing that, and you're able just to walk in and start recording as live, it's going to make things a lot easier. So personally, I would always try and avoid doing live recording. However, it's much easier now with things like Periscope or Facebook Live. I think LinkedIn's starting to do live recording videos at the moment. So it's definitely worth practicing it with that. The image shown is Jonathan Pollinger, who still does. In fact, he was periscoping then many, many years ago, but he's still doing Facebook Live every Monday at 9 o'clock. And you just have to do that to get better at it. But that's something you could do live at an event afterwards. You could be Facebook Living it to everyone. But the thing is to know who you're talking to and make sure that they're going to say what you want them to, and also warm them up. Maybe if you've got a team of you working, get someone to speak to them first, find out who they are, make sure they're comfortable with chatting, what they're going to chat about, that sort of thing, because you can't fix it afterwards.
No.
But if you do it, make sure you keep the original recording. So whatever's going out live, keep that recording, because even if it's not perfect when it goes out live, doesn't matter. It's live, it's transient, it's gone. You can keep the recording and edit it for putting on YouTube or your website afterwards. Cutaways. Now, also known as B-roll, but this is really useful for hiding edits, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But I will just talk about things that you can film, I've got an example of some lovely patisserie cakes here. I was doing an interview with a patissier guy, and I just had a quick interview with him, and then I did a cutaway shot of his cakes, close-ups, and so on. And the reason for this is, A, it allows you to hide and edit, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it gives you context. You know, he's talking about his lovely cakes. Well, let's see those lovely cakes. If someone is talking about beer that they make, then, you know, maybe they can be holding their beer so you can see it on screen. Maybe there's some cutaway shots of people drinking it and enjoying that particular product. There's always ways that you can bring in cutaway shots. I think get more than you need.
Definitely.
Just film lots of stuff, because you always will need more. I found that. The other way to get good cutaway shots is alternative camera angles. So I think we're going to talk about this in edit, so I'll leave it to that point. But noddies and so on, which I'll come to. Any other good ideas for cutaways that can be useful?
Well, with cutaways, I'd always get as much as possible, because it helps break up a sequence. So it's great to see the person that you're talking to, but if it's going on for sort of 10 minutes, it can be quite intense if it's just one single shot. So it's good to sort of add context to what they're talking about. You can sort of showcase different, you know, like the product that they're talking about. And it also, you can hide a multiple of sins within the edit, so you can sort of tidy up some of their, you know, what they're talking about, or just sort of get rid of gaps or ums and ahs, which will just help it flow a lot more. I'm a big fan of cutaways because it just makes life a lot easier, but it's just making sure you've got different options. You can use, it doesn't have to be moving image, you can use still images and kind of do like an animated effect on the timeline to help break it up. So definitely make sure you've got cutaways.
So editing. So you've got all your footage. Now it's time for editing. Story is what's key here. Really, really important that you create something that is interesting. If it's not interesting, it doesn't matter how many testimonials we've got. If they're not interesting, people aren't really going to watch them, or if they do, they'll watch one. Whereas actually, if your testimonials are interesting and giving something away, people may want to watch more because they're getting something out of it. So essentially, when you're editing, for our podcast, we tend to have jump cuts. For customer interviews, we tend to avoid that a little bit more and go to more cutaways. I go for a more professional approach. It's much more about, demonstrating the quality of our video and editing, but also it's just a bit smoother. Whereas I think for the podcast, it's about delivery of information, and mainly it's audio quality that's important.
And it's a very trendy thing. So a jump cut is when you sort of splice the edit quite sort of harshly to just cut out all the druff, all the things that you don't want in there. So you will see the person sort of twitching between the frame.
Yeah.
Whereas when you don't do that, and it's a softer edit, that you want to have a flow, you don't want to see the person sat here and then the person's over here. So otherwise it's quite a jarring experience. But for something that's sort of on the fly and quite, you know, in the moment, a jump cut edited piece would be quite acceptable. I
think if we go along the line that audio is more important than the video quality, if you can cut it down to make the flow and narrative more acceptable, because they're not waffling, they're not losing direction, I think jump cuts are fine. They can also make it a bit more exciting, but sometimes you don't want that. Sometimes you don't want it to be super exciting. You want it to be just, you know, you don't want people to focus too much on the style of it. You want them to take in the information. Something else that Claire does is to take notes of takes. So as people are going through, she'll make a note of the time code or the file name of the video that she's recording, and then checking back with the client or customer who she's recording on behalf of to make sure it's a good take. Something else that I've got more recently and I've been using are these mini whiteboards. So yeah, they're really cool, little tiny size whiteboards. You could actually get one of these and just put someone's name and take and put it in front of the camera. Let me hold it like that. Put it in front of the camera. And then that way, when you are looking through all the video clips, these whiteboards are going to be at the front with the person's name and take on it. So it's going to be a lot easier for you to manage your edits. It's only something started doing really for personal videos that I've been sending, but actually that could be quite useful. So I'll make sure you get one of those, Claire.
Yes, please do.
So just a couple of other things, because I think we're going to run a little long, so hopefully people are okay with that. There's obviously lots to talk about. best way I found with editing, I think you agree with this, Claire, if you're doing a short interview, is to get that best interview clip down first. Just put that straight in your editing package, and then go through and get rid of any duplications, coughs, restarts, ums and ers, and that sort of thing. Just clean it up. Make sure you've got a good story. Don't worry about the jump cuts and anything like that. Just get that story in. Remove any waffle. And then you can start to go through and tidy it up and actually hiding those edits. So some examples we talked about, maybe you can use 2 different camera angles. So if you were filming it, if you've got 2 cameras, maybe you have one that's almost straight on and then maybe another camera off to one side. I think within 180 degrees, is that right? Is that?
Yes. Yeah, so you can either go 180 or to like 45. You wouldn't want to go one slightly closer on the same angle because it would be quite sort of jerky.
It does look. I've seen people use that, and it's okay, but it's not perfect. I think it's better to have one almost full on, and then one to the side, maybe slightly cropped in or further back. Yeah. Maybe sometimes even people have another camera quite far back, showing the interview taking place, and that's quite fun as well.
Yeah, definitely.
It depends on your style.
I would definitely have one sort of close up, one slightly wider. If you're going to move the camera on an angle, I'd do a 45, because if it's just like there, it's not enough for it to be a different shot.
Almost looks like a jump cut, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The other thing to do, if you don't have 2 cameras, and often you don't, is to film the interviews as you wouldn't want to film it, with straight on. And then get your second camera angles afterwards. So what we used to do is you'd move your camera on the tripod somewhere else, maybe behind the interviewer's head, maybe with the interviewee defocused in the background, but the back of the person's head clear. And then just talk to them again. So reset the camera and go back around and talk to them and just have another quick chat. Also, what you're doing for the rest of the day, you're doing on the weekend, you're watching the rugby, that sort of thing. And then you can use that footage as a cutaway in there, because that person's still talking to you. You can see their mouth moving, but you can't see exactly what they're saying. So you can actually insert that in, but keep their audio over the top and use that as a transition between two clips. And the same with noddy shots of the interviewer. And this is something you can do even if your interviewee has left. You can sit in the same place, move the camera around, facing at you, and you just nod like this. And maybe you ask the questions again. All the questions that you ask in the interview, you ask the questions again and nod. And then you can use those cutaways as if you were there at the same time with 2 cameras on each of you. It works really well. You do have to do it exactly at the same time. Just straight afterwards with the same light and setup. If you were to wait until another day, it's going to look different. The lighting's going to be have changed. So you've got to do it just after the interview, but that works really well. And then also cutaway shots, as we said, if the customer's talking about the product or service, have a cutaway shot of the product or service. I think that is it there. In terms of publishing, I would recommend YouTube specifically. Certainly, I think it's particularly useful if you want it for SEO purposes. A lot of people like Vimeo as well. Allows you a lot of customization. One thing I would say, whichever you use, is to customize your own thumbnail. Don't just let YouTube pick it. Make your own thumbnail in a graphics package. So I tend to use a clip from the video where everyone's smiling and happy. I optimize for smiles if possible, because again, that's visceral. We're mirroring that. And then putting extra graphics over the top. So we've got an example from our podcast there and an example from Communion Architects. You can customize that over the top. So images would be 1920 by 1080 pixels. And then you can upload that straight into YouTube for a very good crisp thumbnail. Then I would embed that on your blog post along with a mini transcript. If you've got time to do that, you can always pay someone to write that for you, where they just listen to it and just pull out the key bullet points. And put that on your blog post or a specific client page. And if you do have that transcript, also embed it into the description in YouTube as well, because that can be helpful. Make sure your YouTube video links back through to your website or client blog page, wherever it's hosted. And I've given an example here. You can use, if someone's reviewing a product and they're talking about a product, well, then other people might be searching on Google or YouTube for reviews of that particular product. So why don't we use search optimization techniques to optimize the title tag? So if it's a visual on camera review, for example, then we put that in the title. So it could be a visual on camera reviews, and then when they were taken. But a visual on camera review might be what people are looking for. Maybe it's on a specific camera, so we want to make that title more specific. So I'll definitely look at doing that for your videos that you upload to YouTube specifically.
Yeah, and make sure you have a call to action at the end of your video. So
buy now.
Or for more information, contact us.
Yeah, I like that. I'm just going to quickly whip through the kit I use. Claire uses some slightly different kit to me. She does it better, more professionally, but I'll just quickly whip through. So I use an iPhone 7 at the moment. The iPhone, which is great. It's got 4K on the back-facing camera, or 720p, I think, on the front-facing camera. The iPhone 11 has much better cameras and quality and optics in there. So actually, if you want to do a lot of filming, I'd definitely recommend getting the newer iPhone cameras. I mean, Samsung and other Android cameras are good as well. I just think for video, Apple has the edge on that. It's really good, crisp video. When I'm out and about, I use the same mic I do for podcasting, which is this Shure MV5. What I like about it is you can plug it in via USB to a Mac or PC, or straight into the iPhone, which makes it a lot easier to manage because the audio is synced with the video. We're not going to go into why that is an issue, but it's definitely worth having it straight on there. And I have it on this little tripod mount. So if I'm out and about, I can put this little Gorilla mount anywhere I like. I can wrap it around things, or I can just hold it like that. Also getting a little Joby iPhone mount. So this allows you to put your mobile phone into a tripod. It fits most phones in there because you can stretch it. The tripod I use is this Manfrotto tripod. I quite like it because it's got a nice little pistol grip on here for moving stuff around. You can tighten up and lock off the head so it doesn't move, or you can loosen it and just allow you to sort of move around gently if you're following some action. It's big enough to do stand up, or you can actually just keep your camera mounted and then hold it. It gives you a different way of holding it. You could probably even use it like a selfie stick as well. I think that's it in terms of the kit. What camera do you use, Claire?
I use a Canon 60D, so it's a digital SLR. The thing that I like about it is that I can change the lens, so I can have wide angle, sort of cropped macro. It helps you with each lens. You have different sort of depths of field. You have different apertures, so you can, in low light, if I have a high aperture, I will be able to counteract the natural light. So it doesn't, I don't necessarily have to have extra lighting and things like that. And it's just sort of quite a standard sort of camera really, but it's amazing what you can do on the video front with it. And the feature that I really like about the 60D is that it's got the reversible screen. So while I'm talking to someone, because a lot of people want to know how they're looking on camera, I can literally flip the screen, they can have a look, they're happy, I can turn it back. So it's quite helpful on a customer's point of view.
Yeah, well, particularly useful if you were doing that interview in person. So if you're going there with the camera, you haven't got a camera person to manage everything for you. Being able to see that you're in shot is incredibly important. It's one of the reasons I do the selfies, is because then I can see myself in there. I know we're all in shot. It's not using the best camera though. The best camera is the one on the back there. It's really good quality. The problem is I can't see. Cool. There's a few other programs I mentioned there. I actually won't go into those now. We probably should talk about the different ways of using programs, but Clips and iMovie on the iPhone are very, very useful if you've got nothing else. In fact, no, not if you've got nothing else. They're actually decent programs in and of themselves. And Claire uses Final Cut because she's a pro. So basically, sorry, we're overrunning a little bit, but that's it. Hopefully we've gone through lots of detail there. Hopefully you've taken some information and you can find one action that you can take forward. I'm certainly, for me, the action is I'm going to use this a lot more in what I do. Claire, you're getting one, and I'm going to use this because I really find a struggle afterwards when I'm trying to flick through footage, trying to find what's what, and this is going to make things a lot easier for me and understand how many takes or what take number I'm on. So yes, if you've got any particular actions, do let me know. I'd love to hear in the comments. We don't have any time for Q&A. maybe we'll need a separate one of these for Q&A. So pick the next topic. So we've got setting up a Google ad, how we make our podcast, which I'm quite interested to do, and how we go through that process. Or if you want, advanced WordPress layout in blocks, HTML and CSS. I've been looking forward to doing this for a while in terms of diving into some of the things that a lot of our customers get us to do. And while I'm happy for that to happen, actually, I think it's really useful for people to know how that works, when to use HTML and custom CSS to get the styles and effects you want. So let me put out the poll for next month's topic. Let's share that.
Do I get to
pick
as well?
Yeah, you get to pick as well, Claire. Anyone on does. And yeah, do pick what you'd like to see on there. Otherwise, I'm going to pick. And if you're not a club member, you can join for actually I've put £250. It's £300 for 12 months if you pay monthly at £25 a month. If you pay for the whole year, it's £250 ex VAT. We've just updated our website actually on with the page on the website with a bit more information on that, so do go and have a look. Obviously a lot of you are members, so if you know someone who you think this would be worthwhile joining us, then just send me an email, hello@rather-inventive.com, and say my friend or colleague would like to join. Can they come on the next podcast, and we'll give them a free pass to come on and see what it's all about. And then if they join, you get £50 either donated to a charity on that you pick, or for some of the work you want to do through us. So thank you very much. The next club session is on the 24th of March, and I have had right, how to make a podcast. That's what we're going with for next month. So thank you very much, Claire. Thanks for your time. Sorry to everyone for overrunning, but I think it was worthwhile. There's a lot of information there, and see you on the next one.
Okay, bye.